Blessings, everyone. How are you feeling today? How is your heart? How is your body feeling? Can you feel these amazing energies starting to come in from this upcoming solstice portal? Wow, I can already feel it in my body. I can already feel the magic that is starting to be cultivated and starting to actually like ripple through my being. So it definitely feels like many of us are right on the cusp now of some major energy upgrades. And I think that's the most exciting thing that could possibly be happening now. And on top of that, it also feels like a time when so many of us are starting to open up, starting to kind of expand our horizons of reality, of how we see the world, and especially the kind of belief systems that we carry. And one of my favorite things to do is to tell stories, and especially to tell kind of like Gnostic tradition-based stories about Yeshua being the true name of Jesus. And a lot of these ancient stories that were carried by the Essenes, the people that Jesus came out of, and also of the ancient kind of mystery schools, because that knowledge, as sacred as it was, in many ways doesn't have a lot to do with today's world. At least it doesn't have a lot to do with how we live our lives on a daily basis, because life back then, 2, 3, 4,000 years ago, was very different than it is today. But now it feels like the energy of the planet is really starting to rise. And I know that's a very woo-woo spiritual term. What do I mean by that? It feels like the collective consciousness of the planet is starting to become malleable in a way where we can receive kind of maybe teachings from the ancient world and start to apply it, understand it, and express it to our daily lives, in a very modern way. And so I love telling these ancient Gnostic stories and kind of bringing back these lost wisdom traditions from the mystery schools and getting to speak about it, getting to explore it, and really helping people see the value that these ancient peoples carried. What were these ideas? What were these terms? What were these stories? And seeing how that can actually have a really profound impact on our lives today, and something we can actually start to embody and starting to express and starting to really bring into today's society in a way that's not so woo-woo, even if it is woo-woo, but it's a way of making spirituality really pragmatic, really practical, and something that can actually enrich our lives. And one of those subjects or areas that I've been exploring recently and have had some really amazing conversations about is the idea of Immaculate Conception. So this is a term that many of us are familiar with, especially because it comes from the Bible. It comes from kind of, surface level modern day Christianity, of the way in which Jesus was conceived as a child, that he was this product of this Immaculate Conception, that his mother was a virgin, and that God somehow in his or her amazing presence was able to impregnate a woman, thus giving birth to his son, the quote-unquote Lord of the world, or the Son of God, that which will come and save us. And a lot of that is kind of coming from the miracle tradition of modern Christianity. And what I love about Christianity on all levels is that it's all true. And what I mean by that is that many of these stories of the ancient world, of the mystery schools, and certainly in ancient Christianity, is that these stories in many ways had these archetypal meanings to them, or ways of resonating with the information that will meet you where you are. And so I really, before I kind of dive into some of the mystery school teachings about Immaculate Conception, I also want to preface this in saying that this information also might push some people's buttons, or certainly might expand you beyond your comfort zone, especially in relation to this material, and especially for people that are devout Christians in their understandings. And so when I get into this, let's just say the traditional story of the Virgin Mary being a virgin, getting impregnated by God in whatever mechanics that took place, I don't want to take away your belief in that story, because to you that story is true. And if that's the level in which it enriches your life, if that viewpoint and that philosophy and that belief system or interpretation of the scriptures is somehow improving your life and helping to validate your faith and making you a better person, then please stay with that belief system, because that's how these stories of the ancient world were designed, so that they have multiple layers or levels of truth in them. And And so it's really beautiful for you to receive the level of truth in which you feel comfortable with. So none of this is to tell anyone else that they're wrong. I'm simply going to maybe add an extra few layers to the traditional understanding of it, and then you can figure out what feels best for you, because that's the beauty of belief systems. We all have them, and it's about finding the ones that create resonance within us and somehow inspire us and uplift us. And that's really the core of how Gnostic storytelling is done, is where you get to share the story on different levels, and then that story will enter into someone's field based on the level of consciousness that they embody. And it will continuously get deeper or more rich or more expansive the more work you do on yourself and the greater levels that you cultivate within you. So it's a continuous process where it can start on a very surface level and a very simple understanding, and then as you start to work with the information more, as it reflects the work that you're doing on yourself, you start to encounter these vast vistas of wisdom, of understanding, and of knowledge that was there the whole time. We just simply didn't have the ability to access it based on our own stuff that we're working through. So with that being said, yeah, it's time to share maybe some greater understandings of what the idea of Immaculate Conception really is, at least from the perspective of the communities that Jesus came out of and also the other mystery schools. But how this was very common knowledge to these people at this time, and that at that time they would work with it, they would teach it, and they would actually bring many couples through the process of conceiving a child in this way. So I shared that as a spoiler alert in the caption of this video. Jesus was not the only person brought through this process of immaculate or light conception. This was actually a very common practice done in the ancient world. And so what does this mean? How did the ancient world teach it? And what can this mean for our lives today? So the idea of Immaculate Conception is a term that's also synonymous or used in place of the idea of something called light conception. So what is light conception and how does it work? Well, in the ancient world, and especially in the lineages of the ancient mystery schools, one of the highest ideals that could ever be achieved or embodied by a human is our ability to no longer be bound by the limitations of physicality, of having a physical form. While still having a physical form, yes, we're still very much in a physical body, but no longer being bound by the limitations of that. And this in itself can seem very, very, very magical. But what it means is, so essentially, a lot of these teachings of the ancient world are how to bring ourselves into true alignment with the being that dwells within us, our soul, our spirit, our essence, whatever term you like to call it. And once we get in contact with this greater aspect of who we are, how then do we bring it down? How do we embody it? And how do we live from a place where, yes, we are physical, but we're not just physical. We're also expanding into different levels of reality, of dimensions, of energy fields, however far you want to take it. But it's simply about, yes, being human, but not just being human, being a limitless, energetic being. And that's kind of the ideal of these teachings of the ancient world. So how that relates to light conception, or the idea of light conception, is, so when you're able to refine yourself enough on these deeper energetic levels, you literally, again, you're cultivating the presence of energy, of light, of spirit within your form. And when you start engaging in these practices, you know, the benefits of them can be truly profound, if not magical and miraculous. And where the fun really starts is, okay, what happens if you are doing this type of work and you're cultivating yourself to this very deep or high or ecstatic level of awareness, and then you are in union or partnership or relationship with someone who is also doing this work. Then you get to plan these vast, you know, amazing vistas of consciousness together, which I'm sure a lot of you out there have had a chance to explore when you're consciously relating or in a conscious relationship with someone. And this gets even more delicious and juicy and fun when you're starting to incorporate the idea of sacred sexuality or conscious sexuality, because some of the highest tantric practices, of course, take place in very non-physical ways. So the idea of light conception is where two people can come together who have done sufficient amounts of inner work and transmutation of their flesh, a term that we often hear about in Gnostic Christianity, the transmutation of flesh, or the ability for you to harness and hold greater levels of light within your being. And when you start to accomplish that, you're becoming less and less physical, less and less dense, more and more of an etheric or light-filled being. And then when you start to use that type of understanding and incorporate that within connection and sensuality and sacred sexuality with a partner, all sorts of amazing things can happen. And one of those things that is possible is, again, the term light conception. So when you're trying to accomplish the idea of light conception, essentially what you're trying to do is literally conceive a child through the energy process of making love. So you can literally be energetically making love to someone, having these beautiful tantric exchanges. And because you're so refined in your essence and they're so refined in their essence, the idea is that you can actually physically conceive a child through lovemaking in this way. I know, I mean, that might sound absolutely crazy and absolutely out of control for many of you, but this is the core essence of a lot of the highest practices of these ancient mystery schools, is where, again, you can cultivate yourself to these high and lofty degrees of energetic and conscious awareness, where you literally can make love to someone non-physically, your partner. They can make love to you, and the power and the potency and the concentration of this energy and magic is to such a high and sufficient degree that you can literally conceive a child in this way. And what I love about this is it's really based, that ability is based on the individual work that each partner has done. So oftentimes when I'm working with men in the different men's work that I do, a lot of it is based on the understanding of how do we create a relationship with the seed essence that we carry within ourselves as men. So the seed essence is, our sacred seminal fluid, or our cum, if you want to use whatever word you like to use for it. It's about creating a relationship with this core seed essence, because our semen, our ejaculate, these things, this is some of the most powerful substances on a physical level that the masculine can create. It's really beautiful too, because when you look at it from different perspectives, especially Eastern medicines, they say that when we're creating our seed, it literally almost requires our whole system, our whole body system, all the organs, everything, to contribute to that process to create our sacred fluid, our sacred seminal fluid. And on an energetic level, this is high potency stuff. It's so drastically overlooked by today's society. And for most men, is they don't actually understand the true potency and the power of what our semen is and what our sacred seed is. And so part of this process of refining yourself, especially if the end goal is to come into a place of creating a child through light conception, what they would teach, they would have different types of teachings for both men and women. And oftentimes it would be a long period of self-work, and many times not even being around other women if you're a man, or not being around other men if you're a woman. But you go through this process of refinement and opening up in these deeper levels of who you are and creating this sacred seed essence. Because what the ancient Essenes, the mystery school that Yeshua, Jesus, came out of, what they would teach is that when a man creates this relationship with his sacred seed essence, what you are literally doing is cleansing it, refining it, and infusing it with a massive amount of consciousness and light. Again, these can be very woo-woo terms for a lot of you out there, but what you're doing is you're essentially encoding it to its highest frequency possible, or its most pristine form. And that would make sense even on a biological level. Of course, the better quality your seed is, the better quality your offspring will be, theoretically. So you're doing that, yes, on a physical level, you're cleansing your seed. You're refining your seed essence. You're really tapping into the wisdom and understanding of what is down there. But then on an energetic level, you're really purifying it. You're really creating crystalline matrix in it. And what happens is, as a man, when you create this relationship with your seed essence, when you are diving into the deepest levels of this amazing substance that your body creates, and then working with it on energetic levels, you could look at it as almost like you're putting in a new template or a new geometric matrix within the seed that is creating the foundation of the template in which a truly advanced or lofty spiritual soul can come down. And your seed has the ability then to ground in that soul. Because when we as men offer our seed into a woman's womb temple, and especially if the woman has been doing her work as we've been doing our work, and creating her womb container to be this immaculate frequency to receive the highest codes of light, when the man has done this work, and the woman has done this work, and when the seed is then offered into a woman's holy of holies, her womb temple, when it's been prepared to such a high degree, it really is creating the foundation or landing pad, if you will, for a truly enlightened soul to come down, or a soul that would require that type of purity, that type of immaculate energy and pristine nature to come through. Because the greatest quality of light, when it shines through, requires, a channel or a prism of sufficient high quality as well for that light to shine through. It's kind of a crude analogy, but that in essence is what the mystery schools would teach for couples in union who wanted to engage and experiment in this practice of light conception. It really would be about this individual process of personal refinement to create, again, this immaculate temple of light and energy and purity in our field. And when our partners do the same thing, then some truly amazing and miraculous and magic things can take place. Now, I said Jesus wasn't the only one conceived in this way, and he wasn't. So when you go back into the Gnostic scriptures, and especially when you go back into the ancient Essene world, or the ancient Egyptian world, primarily in the Hathor School, you start to see all these amazing stories of the idea of Immaculate Conception, or what is more commonly known then, which was light conception, that this practice was a regular practice. Now, it wasn't an easy practice. This wasn't something that just anyone could do. It literally required years of dedication, years of practice, years of personal development and refinement, as well as being in union with someone who's also doing that work. So the commitment for it was profound. The commitment to engage in this practice of light conception was a big deal, and not something to be taken lightly, and not something many people would pursue because of the level of difficulty it was to get to that place. But it was done on a very relatively common basis within the mystery schools, and Jesus wasn't the only one brought through this way. And it was kind of a beautiful teaching, is that it's almost like, we say we pick our parents or our parents pick us, however it works. I can really see, these souls on a mission that are really trying to bring through some exquisite frequencies and teachings and presences on the planet. Of course, they would look for the matrix or the lens in which they can come through that was sufficiently prepared for them to come through. And I don't mean that as, only truly enlightened souls can come through this way. No, not necessarily. What I mean by that is, in order for that to take place, it would mean a lot for the parents to have to go through this. And so there's something really beautiful about people who undertake this process of personal development and personal refinement, because their whole life changes. It's not like you can live a very unhealthy, shitty life, but still be cultivating, the ability to light conceive. No, it requires fundamental and systemic shifts in your whole life. And so if you're about to go down this pathway, you'll notice that your whole life has to shift in many ways to be ready for this process to take place. So I often find that the people who are engaging and going down this place of exploration, looking to light conceive, they are truly amazing people, because they're dedicated in some of the most profound ways to this process, which again uplifts your whole life. And that's kind of what's fun about this process is that when you're getting ready or interested in light conception, your whole life will shift. And so it has this synchronistic ability to shift your life for the better, as well as preparing to welcome in a beautiful soul conceived in this way. And it wasn't always conceived necessarily non-physically. So you can also have physical intercourse. You can make love. You can have sex with someone physically and be engaging, in this energy practice, and still conceive a child through this practice. But the highest levels, the highest of the highest of the highest of the alchemical levels in the mystery school, was to cultivate this ability to do it non-physically. And I believe that was possible. Again, are we looking for proof now? I probably couldn't give any proof. How would you know necessarily? Unless you've never made love with anyone, anything like that, and you got pregnant. But all that being said, I believe that this type of work is possible. I've personally experienced some pretty amazing things happen to me in this incarnation, in this life, that defy explanation and somehow must involve our ability to transcend our physicality, to transcend the limitations of the third dimension. So if that doorway is open, how far can we take it? And again, this is why the mystery schools and the teachings of the mystery schools were so profound and so beautiful, because it's like going to a university where this is the core understanding that we are not bound by the physical world. And so once we have that as our core fundamental belief system or understanding, then we get to fucking play with it. Like, how far can we take this? And then in these mystery schools, you're surrounded by other people who are exploring this idea that we don't have to be bound by physicality, and there is, something higher up there. And then you have masters in these mystery schools teaching this kind of stuff. So what I love most now is, I spoke of how can we express this and apply this in our daily lives, even though it seems ridiculous and spiritual and woo-woo. What this means now is, I feel like it can have a really profound effect on our daily lives, is because if we wanted to move in the direction, in alignment with these teachings of Immaculate or Light Conception, again, it requires some pretty fundamental and systemic changes in our lives. Basically, we need to purify ourselves. We need to bring ourselves into alignment. We need to have a good and healthy relationship with ourselves in order for this process to happen, which has an amazing value on our daily lives. And what I love most is the systemic teachings that would come through the mystery schools often revolve around a term called preconception cleansing. And again, that goes into the idea of refining your sacred sexuality, refining your seed essence if you're a man, or if you're a woman, refining your womb temple and your womb space. And for me, one of the most difficult things that I've experienced this lifetime is kind of like cleaning up the mess of my childhood. In many ways, cleaning up the mess of my parents, because it just seems, all parents do their best. And some parents do a better job, some parents do a shittier job. Let's just say I experienced a little bit of both, maybe a lot of both when I was growing up. And I've spent a lot of time cleaning up for, let's just say, the belief systems and the patterns and the ways of thinking that my parents had and that they projected on myself and my brothers growing up. So one of the key elements of Immaculate Conception that I like is it gives us the opportunity to say it all stops with us. Because oftentimes negative thinking, behavioral patterns, things like that tend to be brought down generation to generation through the lineage, because as your parents were, you tend to embody a lot of these qualities and bring on a lot of these patterns. And think of all the work that we've had to do to kind of like fix the messes that our parents made. Again, it's rare that they ever intentionally did these things to us. They were doing the best they can. They were bound by their own limitations and their belief systems and their habits and their patterns. But think of the world that we could live in if the next generation of children are literally born with the greatest gift we could offer them, which is a clean and clear template. So that they're not born into these patterns that they're eventually going to have to clean up, that we as parents, with our best intentions, end up broadcasting and downloading into our children. So part of this idea of Immaculate Conception and part of this idea of preconception cleansing literally is like going in and fucking cleaning up physically, cleaning up emotionally, cleaning up mentally, cleaning up spiritually. And so when we go through this process where we're the janitors of our entire being, what we're doing is we're also kind of taking that out. Like, what a gift that is for the next generation when we can be, you know what? It all stops with me. All the stuff that's been coming down the different lines from my mother, from my father, generation after generation, we literally get to say, it stops with us. How fucking powerful is that? How amazing is that? What a blessing is that it no longer has to continue generation after generation. We can say, no, it stops with us. And my children are not going to have to clean up these messes. And, no one's perfect. We're still going to be creating messes, I'm sure, for our future children. And the main difference is we're going to have a better idea or awareness of some of these things we're working on, and hopefully do the majority of cleanup before they're born. And the fascinating thing is there's a term called epigenetics, and we're starting to understand the way genetics are encoded generation to generation. Is when we do that type of work, it's literally like it's being removed from our DNA. It's like it's being removed from our seed essence as a man. It's being removed from your womb space as a woman. So again, we're creating these like really strong foundations, these crystalline matrices, if you will, in which the energy for these souls to come in and are probably really looking for can come in and ground and be anchored through the work that we're doing. Really, it's like we're creating a landing pad. We're creating a landing pad for them to come down. And it's incredible to think again that in the ancient world, this was a pretty common understanding in the mystery schools, of course, but this was a common understanding and very much a common practice of light conception and of teaching people how you refine your essence enough to no longer be bound by the limitations of physicality, to become more of a luminous or radiant being, if you will, and then to do these type of sacred practices with a partner and conceive a child in this way. Like, this is the true essence of conscious conception. Light conception, immaculate conception, is the ability to do this. And this was just normal back then, which is amazing. Like, think of how far we've come. And the best part is it's starting to come back, because collectively, on a relative level, we're starting to see the need to prepare and cleanse and clear ourselves before we have children. And again, this is not to take away from anyone who already has children who maybe didn't do this work. The cool part is you can always do more and more of this work, and it always benefits our offspring even after they're born. But a lot of it should, and I don't mean to say should as anything, but I personally feel, and also it's what was taught in the ancient worlds, is that it's far better to do as much work as possible before your children are born. And it's the process that I've been engaging in on and off for the last 3 years, and really starting to dive into it now as I feel myself, drawing near when I would like to become a father. And I feel the presence of my children, very much with me, which is for me a sign that they're like, hello, I want to come in now. Are you going to get on with it? And I'm like, yes, as it's time, a partner is paramount first. So I've got to get that. I don't know if I can immaculately conceive a child in myself, but I'm open to that. I'm certainly happy to allow a miracle into my vessel. But yeah, I'm starting to feel the need to focus more and more on this path of Immaculate Conception, to prepare myself for this rite and this ritual. Whether my children will be conceived through pure light conception or not, I don't know. We'll see. It would be amazing if at least one of them was. But if not, the process and the preparation is still a great value to my life, and my seed essence will have been affected by this work, even if it still takes place, conception still takes place through the physical act of making love. But I just love the fact that these teachings are coming back, and they seem to be meaning something to a lot of us now, and have some great value to a lot of us now as we move in this direction. And I think maybe for the end of this, because I know this is such a broad topic and there's so many areas to explore in this, and maybe I'll do some more sharings about it. But I guess I'll share one of my favorite story from the ancient Hathor School. And it was a story of when some of these light conception rituals were taking place. And one of my favorite stories, it would take place between a priest and a priestess. And the Hathor School is a, let's just say, a very misunderstood mystery school of ancient Egypt. Well, I think both the Isis and the Hathor School are extremely misunderstood by most mainstream teachings, especially in our conscious community. Everything is Isis related or ancient Egypt, all these kind of things. So it's been a real honor for me to kind of get back to a lot of the source material, and let's just say to start translating it in my own way. And one of my favorite stories from the Hathor School is the Hathor School used to say that in order for this practice to happen, you literally have to be in a solid container and union with someone you can trust. So the idea of light conception is not something that can happen randomly or through like a one-night stand. It literally requires both people to be doing the work, the man and the woman, but it also requires a container of trust and safety to be present. That it's really required in a relationship. Like, you need an energy container. You could say in today's terms, a relationship agreement, or some kind of understanding of what the relationship is through monogamy and devotion and dedication to each other. But they would say once you create this energy container, that has to be built, and that is as important as it is for both partners to be doing these types of refinements energetically on their being. And so the ritual, I remember reading, would take place where the priest and the priestess would be in this beautiful temple, and there would be this beautiful black granite altar in the middle of the temple. And they would do this ritual, and it's almost like it was like a dance, you know. It's like their idea of foreplay was the idea of opening sacred space together and creating the energies and really creating that strong energy bond and container. So as they'd be going through this ritual in this temple space, on the black granite altar, this is where the priest and the priestess would be making love. And so they would be doing these beautiful sex magic rites and ceremony while they were making love on this black granite altar. And in the ancient Egyptian Hathor School, the death rites were a common practice, or death rituals. And what that means is essentially you have the ability to consciously, at will, leave your body and go into the underworld. And what I mean by the underworld is not like hell and demons and things like that. The underworld is the realm of spirit, or when you pierce the veils to the other side. And so this was a common practice where you'd create the ability to literally have your consciousness leave your body as if it was dying and go into the underworld still fully present. So while the ancient Hathor priest and priestess would be making love on this black granite altar, the priestess would go into this death rites ritual, and she would literally die to her physical form, and her consciousness would be journeying through the underworld, again, while this beautiful lovemaking was taking place in the ceremonial way. So as the priest was continuing to make love, the woman, the priestess, would be journeying through the underworld during this death ritual. And while she was in the underworld, she would seek out the soul that she was looking for, or a truly enlightened soul, or a soul that she had a soul contract with. And so she would find the soul of this being that she wanted to bring through into this world. And once she found this beautiful soul, she would bring in this soul and embrace it to her. Again, she's in her energy form in the underworld. And when she finally found that soul and embraced it to her, that's when the priest would literally ejaculate inside her, and the potency of his seed would go into her womb, and that would call her back into life. It would literally call her back out of the underworld into the physical form, back into physicality. And in that moment, the priest and the priestess would conceive the child that the priestess found in the underworld through this sex magic rite. And for me, I mean, that's not true light conception. That's, also physical conception as well as happening on the energy levels. But for me, that's a beautiful story and an amazing story. And it's super hot. I love it. It turns me on too. Is the idea that these type of sex magic and sex rites were common practice in these mystery schools. And really, there's no limit to the type of magic and the mystery and the miracles that can be brought through these types of understandings and these types of rites and these types of rituals for those that are willing to dedicate themselves to this pathway. And so again, when you bring that back to the idea of Immaculate Conception and the way that Yeshua, that Jesus was brought through, Mother Mary, when you follow the understandings of the Coptic and the Gnostic traditions, she was truly an enlightened priestess. She was someone who both studied in India, ancient Egypt, ancient Avalon. She traveled the world to different mystery schools, refining herself and being brought into some of the highest levels of light magic possible. And her partner, Joseph, also was engaged in these ideas of light conception. And so when you read the Gnostic or kind of the Essene wisdom accounts of the way Yeshua was brought in, Joseph and Mary literally went into one of these rituals together, and non-physically, through the act of energy lovemaking and energy container creation, literally were capable of conceiving a child, which was Jesus. And that's the idea of Immaculate Conception. Not that it was some crazy virgin birth from God, but it certainly was a non-physical divine conception based on the magic that both of them together cultivated. And again, this was a common understanding and a common teaching within that community. So it's so cool to get into some of the myths and the magic and the legends of what this was, and then to see how in our own ways, by today's standards, apply a lot of this, and to know that these things are still possible should we want to explore them. So that's a quick download. I haven't done a lot of Gnostic sharings lately, so I just felt called to come on here. Christmas is here, the time of Jesus, allegedly. So I'll share more of his stories and his magic and make it a time of miracles for all of us. But thank you guys so much. If anyone has any questions, feel free to leave it in the video comments. I'll get back, and maybe if there's some really great questions, I'll address them in another video. dive into more of some of this mystery school understandings. But hope you guys have an amazing day or evening wherever you are, and I will talk to you soon.